Hello everyone, and welcome to my May reading wrap-up. All 9 books I read in May were for the Bookemon Badgeathon, so this video is a wrap-up for that readathon as well. 1 book was by a new-to-me author, and 7 were new-to-me books by authors I'd read before. 2 of the books had been on my own TBR shelves, and 1 was a reread. Regarding authors, all 9 books were written by a woman, 1 by an author of color, 2 by a queer author, and 1 by a Jewish author. Regarding main characters, 8 books had at least 1 woman, 3 had at least 1 POC, 2 had at least 1 queer character, and 1 had a Jewish main character. The genre spread was 5 fantasy, 1 horror, 2 historical, and 1 nonfiction. 1 was a graphic novel, and I DNF'd 2 books. My ratings were 1 5-star, 1 4.5 star, 1 4-star, 1 3.5 star, 2 2-stars, and 3 1-stars. The first badge that I completed for the Bookemon Badgeathon was the Rainbow Badge, which was to read a book with queer rep. For this I read The Raven Tower by Leckie. It is a fantasy book that has a lot to do with gods and a fantasy kingdom world. It was very strange. I had to DNF it 60% in because absolutely nothing happened. There was no plot progression, no character development. Usually books have at least one of those, but this one had neither. The main narrator speaks in second person to one of the characters that she, in her godlike powers, observes, and it was a very irritating, distancing way to tell a story. The narrator also tells about very long past events, which is another way of distancing from any type of energy or plot of interest. It was a lot of info dumping, and I just could not fathom what was going on. I really liked Leckie's Imperial Roch series, but this I just could not handle, so I DNF'd it and gave it 1 star. The next badge that I completed was Fantastical Badge, which was to read a fantasy book. For this I tried to read A Secret History of Witches by Louisa Morgan. It's a historical fiction book about a group that is on the run during the early 19th century. It follows this family through 5 generations of finding their witchy powers and how they deal with their regular problems. I found it really boring and repetitive. The audio narrator mispronounced Samhain. She read it like it's written in English, Samhain, but if you're going to be reading an audiobook, you should know how words are pronounced, and someone should have caught that. So I gave up pretty early and gave it 1 star. The next badge that I completed was the Diversity Badge to read a book with a POC main character or that was written by an author of color. Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor fills both of these prompts. This book takes place in a far future post-nuclear Holocaust Africa. There's a lot of genocide and wars between the different groups in the book, and it follows the main character growing up and learning about the powers that she has and trying to escape death from her father that she sees in visions. That's a very, very brief summary. There is a lot going on in this book. Unfortunately, I really didn't like it. The beginning was okay, but as the story progressed, I got more and more confused about how this world works. There didn't seem to be any cohesive rules for how the magic works, when she can draw on it, and when she can't. It seemed to be that she could only draw on the magic when it was convenient plot-wise, or when it was convenient for her not to draw on it to add more tension. Especially when the story shows that she is so powerful, but then she can't use her powers to mitigate the obstacles that they come across. It didn't make sense. The main character was very combative and very unlikable, and a lot of the relationships between friends and lovers didn't make sense. They were so horrible to each other, and then it would bounce really quickly between them being horrible to each other and then between them caring about each other. It made no sense to me, and I didn't like it. I gave it 1 star. The next badge was the Amour badge to read a romance or contemporary. For this, I read The Glittering Court by Richelle Mead. It's a typical YA fantasy world where a girl has to go undercover in order to escape her life, but I actually didn't connect with that because she's from a very rich family and she just wants to escape an arranged marriage, so she forces herself to become this servant in this new world where the glittering court is. And the stakes just weren't high when you are going in that direction from a place of privilege to a place of servitude. There's just no tension there. You don't really feel for her struggles to do the laundry. Like, there's just nothing there. It wasn't a terrible book, but again, the stakes were just really low. I didn't like the way that the antagonist plotline turned out. It became this big whole thing at the end that didn't feel right in the flow of the book. The author did try to incorporate this nuanced religious conflict, but it just didn't work. Also, at the end, there are some subplot lines happening with minor characters, but the author keeps it from the reader even when the main character in this book learns it in order to plug the next books in the series. I didn't care enough to continue in this series, and I thought that was a really cheap move to do that. It makes this book seem really incomplete. I did like some of the friendships between the girls in this book, and I do think that the romantic element was actually, for once, decently done. There was actual interaction between the main character and her love interest and development of that relationship, so those things were good. Overall, though, I think it was weak, and I gave it 2 stars. The next badge that I completed was the Jester badge, to read a book that has humor or comedy. For this, I read Finishing School Book 2, Curtsies and Conspiracies by Gail Carriger. Like the first book, it was just okay. Again, Gail Carriger is really good at the humor and hijinks, but I think that the plot and lack of depth or growth in the characters really detracts from my overall enjoyment of the book. Carriger tried to have the main character Sophronia grow through this book, and there were 2 obvious attempts at that, but they felt false because the stakes just weren't genuine. At the beginning, she's ostracized from everyone as a test in her school, and the whole thing was so stupid because there were no stakes involved. No one really wanted to participate in it. She didn't really learn anything massive from it. It just felt very forced and fake. So again, I'm enjoying the humor and hijinks, but not the actual overall package for these books. 2 stars. Next was the Pictorial badge, to read a comic, graphic novel, or manga. For this, I finished the Sleepless series with Volume 2 by Sarah Vaughn and Leila Del Duca. I liked it. I just really wanted more. I think this could have been a longer series with more complexity, more character and relationship development. It did feel forced into a happy ending because they knew they only had 2 volumes to get everything in. However, the art is still stunning. I love Poppy's character. She's got fantastic strong will, determination, and adherence to her personal values. I just wanted more of it because she was so great and because I was so interested in this. So I gave it 3.5 stars. Next was the Panic badge, to read a horror book. For this, I read Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant, which is a horror book around mermaids, and really flippin' enjoyed it. It's not the perfect book or the best written book out there, but it worked. It made me scared at some points. So, yeah, it was a great combination of creepy, smart, and dangerous. There was a lot going on here with science and plot and characters and relationship and the horror aspect, and I thought that the author balanced it really well. There was a lot of point of view shifts that I thought were a little bit too much, but it didn't detract from my overall enjoyment of the book. There's a lot of representation in this book as far as neurodiversity, sexuality, and race and ethnicity, so that was great. Again, lots of layers here. Not perfect, but it's been a long time since I've read a horror book that's supposed to scare you and has moments where it actually does either scare or creep you out. So I recommend it if you are into that type of thing. I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read another Jane Yolen book, The Devil's Arithmetic, which takes place during World War II. It has a bit of a time travel element to it, and it is geared more toward young adults. What can I say? It's Jane Yolen. She's great, and this book is everything a book about the Holocaust should be. It is brutal and it is important. It's not an easy book, but it's not supposed to be, and I appreciate that Jane Yolen can write a book about a concentration camp for a younger audience and be able to get the point across without dumbing down any of the horror of a concentration camp. Gave it 4.5 stars. Lastly, I completed a book for the Memory Badge, which was to read a biography or memoir. For this, I reread Book of Shadows by Phyllis Curott. I had read this back in high school and found it really eye-opening and instrumental in my thought process over the years on various issues. So I wanted to reread it again, and I found it just as important. I probably would have given it 4 stars if I read it now for the first time, but knowing that history of how important it was to me in high school and being able to still see that on the page, I'm still keeping it at a 5-star read for me. This book is a memoir of Phyllis Curott's journey into Wicca and witchcraft. I'm not going to say that I agree or personally believe anything or everything that she does in this book, but you can see her journey throughout and the importance of that journey to her, and I think that's where this book really shines. And in calling out our modern patriarchal society, I'm not going to get into it too much, but she does a great job of really calling it out. It's a really important book for not just the religious aspects, but the social society aspects as well. So 5 stars, really great read. And that's everything that I read in May and for the Bookemon Badgeathon. Let me know down in the comments if you read any of these books and what your thoughts on them are. Thanks for joining me.